Okay, I'm talking with Mike Vaccaro, and we're going to talk about a CD of his that I've just reviewed and put up at performingartsreview.net. But the more important thing is I want to talk to Mike about this amazing life, really, you have had in music in the big time. Vegas, Los Angeles. I mean, you've been there. You know how this profession works, how tough it is, how exhilarating it is, and to say nothing of your magical capabilities on multiple instruments, which is part of how it works, how you make a living. So that's what I want to touch on, Mike. Well, I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about the first of three CDs that I'm reviewing for you, Journeyman. And the reason I was so interested in Journeyman is that excuse me, it's kind of it's wind music sometimes for 18,000 zillion instruments. You'll talk about that wind instruments sometimes with some of your other colleagues that you'll mention. But it's fascinating that you all of these people that you asked to help write pieces for you for winds are producers and film composers and all that. So in other words, you're right in the thick of things. I want you to talk a little bit about that. Let's get started about how did this, what happened? What, you were 14 and somebody said, hey kid, you're pretty good. What happened? You're a wind player, you play everything under the sun, go.
Well, actually, I was playing in a group called Musique, which was a trio for woodwind voice with my ex-wife and Jack Reeling on piano. And Jack unfortunately passed away, and a couple years went by, and I was missing doing something. So, I was working, but that's not real music. So, in order to play real music, I just reached out to my friends and I said, write what you think I do. And so each one came up with something very different. And that's how it got started. And it was funny because as we, uh, you said we were going to talk about this CD. I looked at it, and it seems to me that took me about 5 or 6 years to do it. And it's interesting because some of the people would come in with completely finished music. Other people would come in and say, okay, we're going to do the first 32 bars today, and the next time we're going to do 16 bars. And they were actually writing it as I was performing it.
It's amazing.
So, yeah, and like I say, the pieces are all very, very different. And but the whole point is for me to feature. I was in the back of my mind. I said, well, all the contractors will want to hear this. Well, they don't care, you know. But
Come on, don't, come on now.
they
Cheer
really
up.
don't. They really don't. Especially now that secretaries are doing all the work and not real musicians. Uh,
I knew we'd get into some dirt. Go ahead.
yeah, but anyway, so what I did is just I told them every instrument that I played, and I said you can write for any of them, and so they wrote for all of them. And I have a closet that I'm sitting next to, this locked closet that's alarmed, full of 30 or 40 instruments, and that's what they did. But that was a long time ago. That was it started in
Back in
'80.
the 80s, and this came out in 96, the CD.
Yeah, and I finished performing it in '89. It looks like.
Talk to me
So
about some of these guys. Nick Venden, I mean, Richard Bowden, Don Harper. Tell me about some of these
yeah,
guys.
let me start at the top with
Okay.
Prologue. That was Mark Davidson, who's a fine jazz pianist, and he doesn't write that much classical music. But I got to the end of recording the CD, and I didn't have something that I thought really started it nice. So I asked him to write me something, and he called it Prologue, and it's kind of like a perfect little start for what's ahead. He just basically used clarinets and flutes. And so that's Mark Davidson. And then Nick Venden, he and I were working in dinner theater of all things. So he was very familiar with my playing because that was just a trio too. So he'd write for everything I owned to get the colors, and he was playing three different keyboards with all kinds of colors, and the drummer was playing drums, timpani, mallets, whatever you could think of. So that's how he kind of got involved. And Richard Bowden, and I don't really remember how we hooked up. I think I subbed in his quintet or something, and we became friends very quickly. and he was doing a lot of work for Disney at the time. And I gave him the same instructions as everybody else. Write what you think I do. So he says, I have this piece, Whimsy, and he says it's not really written for everything you do, but he says I'll make it that way. So he did. He took his piece Whimsy that was written for 5 pieces and made it into, I don't know, like 12 or 13 instruments.
That's where
And,
that's where my jaw first dropped when I heard
yeah,
whimsy. That
yeah.
you this is and talk to us in a bit also about this about the technique of putting
Well,
these tracks together. Go ahead.
the technique was always to put a click track down first, and as you notice, it's not in time, any of it. So the click track would go click, 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 click. So then the next thing was I put the lowest instrument on.
I saw
And
that.
then usually I put an instrument on that was about a fifth away to tune the bottom fifths. And then we just start, putting the instruments on top of it. And on the Celestial Ascension, there's a part of there where I play a bunch of recorders, and alto saxophone has the solo on top of it. And we actually had to kind of tune the recorders like a piano
Hmm.
because it was just hard getting them to play in tune. Nothing else was difficult to play because I know how I play in tune and I know how I play vibrato and I know how I do everything. So I was just playing for myself, the way I play.
Well, I think the
And
thing that about this CD that I mentioned in the review, just yes, see, people talk about little things like intonation. I mean, that is in. I mean, the intonation is incredible throughout. Let alone that you were stacking tracks. So,
yeah,
just to speak to the professionalism of your whole life in Hollywood, that's what I'm trying to get at. Just
yeah.
how special it is. We're not in Des Moines. We're in LA.
Oh, everybody's pretty good here. Even
And
the
by the
guys
way,
that are pretty good.
and pretty tough. So it's a hard, tough life for sure.
It is. It's a very tough life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as it
Because
needs to be. You know.
everybody's basically good enough to do the job, and then there's some that are better than that. And there's a lot that are better than that. I don't want to say it's easy. It's not easy, but there's a lot of great players here. And everybody comes here if they're great.
Yeah,
You know, they don't want to be in Des Moines.
that's right. And speaking of yourself, you had a stint in Vegas when you were a kid. I want to touch on this because it's important that you were discovered. Really, I think you can say that if you're like 15, 16, 17 years old. Stan Kenton Band hires
Yeah.
you. I mean,
Well,
it's sort of like bingo. It took off, right, and has been there ever
it
since.
started in college, and I played with a group called the Collegiate Neophonic that Stan Kenton was involved with. And I was going to Cal State at Long Beach at the time, and I was selected to play the West Coast premiere of a piece called Scaramouche by Darius Milhaud, which is
Yes.
a classical saxophone piece. So I played that, and it went pretty good. And soon after that, through the Neophonic, I got called to play with the Kenton Band. So I'll just give you a little brief, quick history. So I played with Kenton and Woody Herman and Paul Horn and those people, and kind of back and forth between the different groups for about 3 or 4 years. Then I went to Vegas for 3 or 4 years, and I played lead alto at the Sands, and that was a great experience because I've been playing baritone and that kind of stuff on Stan's band and Woody's band, and so I got to play. First of all, I was guaranteed 8 doubles when I went to work there because I played oboe and English horn, and that was hard to find in that town.
Yeah.
There was only 2 or 3 of us, and a lot of the acts had oboe and English horn on it. So, I got to do that for 4 years and play with some incredible people: Lena Horne, Sammy Davis. Just uh, ridiculous. And it's like, well, then I went into theater. When I came back here, and I went into dinner theater. From dinner theater, I started at the Schubert, and then I went to the Pantages, and that was about 20 years of my life.
Can I interrupt for just one second?
Sure.
No offense to Des Moines, but when we talk dinner theater in Los Angeles at the Pantages, and others, we're talking giant, huge, enormous dinner theater.
Well, the
Venues.
Pantages wasn't dinner theater. It was and the Schubert. They were big bands
Yeah.
at the time. They were 17, 18 pieces, And so I did that, and that's one of those things where, the first week's a little scary, and then after that, it's boring for 4 months, you know, which, which is another reason to do CDs on the side, so you don't, shoot yourself or something, you know. And so from that, I went to motion pictures, and I did that for about 10 years. And then I retired, and now I keep doing a little bit of everything, but not as much.
Well, good for you, not as much. Are you kidding?
Well, what retirement meant to me was I just don't do the things I don't want to do anymore.
Yeah.
If somebody calls me and says, "Well, we got 12 weeks for you," no, I'm not.
Yeah, I can understand that. Well, here's the beauty that I want to pass on to everybody that's going to watch this video. The video is going to interview is going to go up with the first CD of yours, Journeyman, that I've reviewed. I'm looking forward to the other two. I'm a little afraid. I'm the classical guy. I'm going to really be looking at your real music making in jazz and so on with Latin Love and A Whisper, A Sigh, A Dream. But I can't wait, and the reason for that is it's kind of hard to explain, but the idea is I know I'm going to hear the best of the best of the best because of your. It's not just me throwing compliments. It's that's what it is. If you have a career as you have had in Los Angeles, you know the people. I know I'm going to meet these people on these other albums, just as I did on Journeyman. That's the big treat.
Yeah.
Mike, what have I forgotten to ask you for this first time out?
Well, we haven't gotten through the CD yet.
Okay, go ahead.
So we did the Celestial Ascension,
Yep.
which was by Alan Davis.
Yep.
And we have good friends since college. And then In a Quiet Place by Alan Davis again. And then we finished off with Carnival 2000, which is the first time that I used somebody else besides either myself or my wife. And it's a rhythm section in me. And I don't know why we did that. Well, I guess when I told him to write what he thought I did, that's what he thought I did. And I've always considered myself a classical musician that plays a little bit of jazz.
Oh, really? Didn't make that connection. I thought it was just the other way around.
No, and people have a hard time believing, first, that you can play more than one instrument, and then two, that you can play them well. So you have to kind of talk people into that, there's people that think that I only play clarinet, and there's people that think I only play flute or oboe, because that's what they were told to hire me on. They needed somebody, and they said, well, I can't do it, but call Mike. He's a good player. And so I'd go play oboe for him, and then from then on, I was their oboe player.
Well, I believe
that's the way they thought of me.
Well, that explains the CD you mentioned earlier. Journeyman was kind of an opportunity for you to show everybody you play just about everything in winds.
Right, exactly.
But also, what dropped my jaw, if you're a wind player, I was a clarinetist. I, went into conducting. But the point is, you play sax, you play clarinet, you play single reed instruments. But when I heard you play oboe and then English horn, not only flawlessly, but in perfect intonation and all the rest of it, that's when I had to pick my jaw up off the floor and realize that this was really a special person, that you had this wonderful career. That's why I'm pleased to have an opportunity to talk with you, because it has been rich. You are so talented, and you represent that thing that is Los Angeles, that is so unique in American music anyway.
That's great. Since everybody wants to be a film person because that's where their best money is, you never know what kind of music you're going to play on a film. I mean, I'll take 3 or 4 mouthpieces on a film if it's a saxophone, because I don't know whether I'm going to play classical saxophone or jazz saxophone or what I'm going to play. So everybody that's trained for that is kind of playing everything.
It's absolutely amazing.
Well. There are people that only play classical music. There are people that only play classical music, but especially in the winds and the brass, and the percussion, we do everything. Whatever they put in front of us, we do.
Yeah. And on a first reading, one take, that's it.
Want. Yeah, that's what they want. Sometimes it's 2 or 3, but once in a while it's the first one.
Mike Vaccaro, it's been a great treat having a chance to finally see you in person and chat with you, and we will meet again. I have 2 more CDs to review for you, and I'm looking forward to it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I think we're done. Thanks, Mike.